Okay, welcome back. Okay, so we've had some questions asking about the sample code. Yes, absolutely, we're going to get this to you. We probably I might even get it at lunchtime, so we're working on it. It's kind of a work in progress. I'm going to post it up onto OneDrive, and we're going to give you the URI so you can actually go and pull that down. So bear with us. We are in the process of getting it together, and yeah. While we're eating a sandwich or something, I might just finish that bit off, and we'll get that to you so you can see the sample code. Right, now this little nice little, come with the clock please, Mr. Maestro. There, thank you so much. Okay, and this session is a shorter one, but it's very important. We're going to talk about page navigation and data binding in Windows Runtime apps. So this is talking about forward and backwards navigation, the role of the frame in all of this. We're going to start touching on topics that relate to app lifecycle, although a deep dive on that we're going to defer off until, I think it's session 5, something like that. Yeah, but then, so there's two topics in this, the navigating bit, and then there's the data binding. So they're not actually sort of directly connected, but they're obviously both important topics. Page navigation first. So we've created a single page app at the moment. Now, at a technical level, what you've got with a Windows Store app in general terms is that it sits within a window. Now, Windows 8.1 apps, big Windows apps, you can have more than one window now. So you couldn't do 8.0, but 8.1 they've added the ability to have more than one window for a store app. On Windows Phone, we've only got a single window, which is the whole display area, unsurprisingly. And inside that, you've got this thing called a frame. Most apps only have a single frame. Some of the SDK samples, they do wacky stuff with extra frames. But for the most part of us, you're only going to want a single frame, which sits again, is invisible, and it's another container that sits inside the whole area of the window. But the frame is important because that is the container for your actual pages. And the frame has also other interesting properties about it in that it tracks navigation between pages. So your pages obviously are also typically sized, nearly always, 100% time size. They are always sized 100% of your, let's get that right, they are always sized 100% of your display area. So the frame is created on app launch. So if you dig down into your app.xaml.cs or .vb or .cpp or whatever your poison is for your logic, you will find a method called onLaunched in a Windows Runtime XAML app, which has, this is your bootstrap code, and the first thing it does in there is it checks whether your window has currently got a frame on it. So the top line of that method you can see there where it says root frame equals window.current.content as frame. So if you're not familiar with C#, as frame means take whatever object is in window.current.content and try and cast it to a frame object. If it's not a frame object, you just give back a null, right? So then the next if statement says if root frame is equal to null, that means we haven't got a frame in our window, so we need to create one. So then we create one. We say root frame equals new frame. This is all boilerplate code. It's all in the new project templates. You will never have to code this yourself. And then drilling down a little bit more, there's a little bit more code that's where the ellipsis is for setting up that frame, which is a kind of boilerplate, start the app up kind of code. And then at the bottom, we have root frame.navigate type of main page and e.argument. So what this is doing is navigating to the first page that the user sees, which in this case is main page, an object called main page, which is what is defined by your main page.xaml file. And then you activate the window. So that's your boilerplate thing. Now, the frame is the container for these pages, so it not only navigates the first one, but it also keeps track as you move through different pages. So it maintains the navigation history. There's a property on frame called backstack, which returns a list of page stack entry objects. A page stack entry are the objects that encapsulates a movement, a forward navigation. It doesn't bother with backwards navigations, but a forward navigation through different pages in your app. So as you navigate between pages, obviously the onLaunched navigates to your first page there, and then as you do stuff, the user does stuff in your app, you're probably going to want to navigate. And a typical one there is where you show a list. Lists are coming up in the next module. And the user taps on an item in the list, so they've selected an item. So you get this like an item click event handler, or a item selected, or some kind of event handler associated with selecting an item. And you'll have some code in there where you would typically, if you think of a master detail kind of thing, you're going to navigate from your list page to a detail page. So here we've got a frame.navigate, which is the way that you navigate to a different page. It's from on any page in your app, you can call frame.navigate, type of, and then you just put the object type of the page where you want to go. This is different, of course, from Windows Phone Silverlight, for those Silverlight devs out there, where you navigate to a URI of a page. So this is one major difference between the two. And you pass some kind of an object. Well, optionally, you don't have to pass anything. But typically, if you're going to pass, you're going from a list where you selected an item in the list, you're navigating to a detail page, you need to tell that detail page what item it needs to show the details of. So you send the item ID in this example. So you're responsible for passing whatever parameters are needed for the app to make sense. This will just come naturally to you. You can navigate back. Now, this actually is not recommended UI, so you could put a large big button on a page, such as on second page there, which says navigate back to main page. And if the user taps on that button, you could have some logic on it. And this is the logic you would always use for navigating back. You always call if this.frame.can go back. So there's a property on the frame that says, hey frame, look in your navigation history and see if there actually is an older page, is there a page I can navigate back to? And if there is, do it. This.frame.go back. You always check, because there are ways you can launch arbitrarily in Windows Store apps, in Windows Phone apps, to any page from a tile, for example. There's other ways of launching apps, URI associations, and we'll talk about a lot of these through the Jumpstart, file associations, NFC launches. Anyway, there's loads of ways an app can be launched, and there could be unique experiences that launches to an arbitrary page. So there may not be a page to go back to, so always check. Now, what about this back button on the navigation bar, the hardware button, or if you've got a phone, one of these phones with soft controls, soft navigation bar, then it'll be a soft control, but nonetheless it'll always be there. The left-hand button on the bottom of the screen. If you tap back on that, what will happen? Well, actually, if the user's on page 2 of your app, they will expect your app to navigate back to page 1, the main page. But actually what will happen is it will close the app. It will suspend the app. It will actually go back. The default action for the hardware back key is to navigate back through the app history, not the page history within an app. So you actually got to put, and actually this is different from a Silverlight app actually, which it does actually in a Silverlight framework. The hardware back key causes a page backwards navigation. So this is different. So you've got to include in a Windows Store XAML app, you've got to include some code to do that navigation, to handle that, intercept that hardware back navigation and tell the system not to do this navigate back through apps. You need to navigate back through the pages. Some of the templates with the new project got that in and some haven't. We will explain what that is, the difference in a minute. So the new project templates, if you create a blank app, and the Contoso Cookbook I've created here was a blank app, doesn't have any hardware back key handling in it. So as soon as you add a second page, you need to add some more code to handle that. If you create an new app using one of the Hub app or the Pivot app templates, that does include hardware back key handling, the right sort of stuff. So you need to be aware of this. The kind of code you add to a blank app is like shown on the slide there, where you need to hook the back pressed event of your hardware buttons object. And in the event handler, you use code like that. Frame is, you get the window.current.content, get the frame. If it can go back, you call frame.goback. And then most importantly, you have to say e.handled equals true. So what you're doing is you're telling the shell, don't worry, I've sorted this out. If you don't set e.handled equals true, the kind of default behavior of navigating out of your app, suspending your app will happen. Sometimes you want to override not on an app level, like in app.xaml.cs, like we just showed there, but in most apps that's probably going to be what you want. But you may have occasions where you need to have specific back key handling on a page. You can do that. You can hook the back pressed event on a page. Here we've got an example of hooking it in the onNavigated to event, unhooking it again on the onNavigated from event, And then there's your event handler in there. So why might you want to do this and not have a page backwards navigation? Well, maybe that page is showing some transit UI. Maybe it's got a pop-up showing. And actually the logical thing for the user, what the user would expect is when they hit back, it will throw away that transit UI and go back to the original rendering of that page. So that's why you might want to do that. So let's have a quick look at that. Back to my system, which hasn't logged out. Woohoo! We can go to, let me find my notes. Okay, so it's a very simple one. Page navigation begin. This is our Contosa cookbook. Again, here's my page. It's the one we created before. We've actually got, we've already got an app bar on there. I want to add a secondary command to it. At the moment, the app bar, we've got an app bar button on there with a flyout. We've got a nice little flyout with some ingredients lists. I didn't show you that actually. Let's show you that first. We run this on the emulator. And this is the same app before, but we've got this app bar on it very easily, and that shows the ingredients. This is a flyout, which I said it's soft. You know, you can actually interact with it and tap on it and that sort of thing. But it's soft. Soft dismiss. So as soon as you tap outside it, it disappears. There's nothing at the moment on the secondary app bar, secondary thing. So let's just go and do that. So one nice way of doing this. This is a window called the document outline, where you can actually drill right down into all the controls on that you've created on, and you can set properties and do stuff in here as well. You can also in your command bar, we can add commands right from here. So I can add an app bar button in my secondary commands, and here's my secondary. Let's put an about page into this app. So we go about. You could actually set an icon on it. It would be ignored, but if you were doing, you wanted to cut and paste, these are all the icons. Just to give you a flavor, all the built-in icons that are available to you. Masses of them, which is really nice because we didn't have that many on Windows Phone 8 Silverlight, but loads and loads and loads of icons, and of course you can create custom ones as well. But anyway, on phone, this is simply wouldn't matter if you specified it, but it's going to be ignored anyway, so I'm not going to do that. And then we're going to put I need to put an event handler on it, so you can do that in a number of ways. I'm going to do it from the properties window. That's put a click event handler on there. And then I'm going to add an existing item. I've already got a pre-built page, so I'm going to add an existing item to this. We go up, and the demos. Where's my items? There we go. Here's my about page. I can add that to my project. So we've added that into it, and now I can go frame.navigate to a type of whatever the type is that we want to navigate to, and that actually is the about page, which we just added. Doesn't need any parameters. We're not passing any navigation arguments to it, but now we'll have a nice little about page. Now, so there we are. There's my about page, which actually has some. Typically, you'd put a bit more information on it than that, but at least that's a good start. Now, what's going to happen when I hit the back button? You'd like to hazard a guess?
Is he going to go back?
Yeah, but go back right out of the app. That's what's going to happen. It suspends the app because we've got no back key handling in this at the moment. So we actually need to fix that. So one way you could fix it is to do the navigation handler. I'll do that in a moment. But the kind of easy way of doing it is just to add that code in that we showed before, which is we go hardware buttons, which I'm going to need to fix up the reference for that, which is using windows.phone.ui.input. And there are loads of hardware buttons. There's actually ones for the camera button as well, as you can see there. But we're going to just hook this guy, create an event handler, and then this is where you put your logic. You say we're going to want to get a reference to the frame, so we go root frame is equal to window dot current dot content as frame. So we're checking we've got a frame, which we surely should have, and then we say if the root frame is not null, That's the first check. And also, if that is true, so if the root frame is not null, then root frame dot can go back. Then we say, okay, good. Then we can actually enter. We go frame dot go back. Call the go back. No, hang on. Root frame dot go back. Sorry. Root frame dot go back. And now, and don't forget, most important, e dot handled equals true. Otherwise, it won't work. And we will go to check that works out, which it should do. We go to our about page. There we go, and then we go back, and yes, we got. And look at the nice. Hey, another thing, you get nice page animations. All you Silverlight developers for free. Yeah. Look at that. You have to add that in a Silverlight app. Nice, cool stuff you get for free in the Windows XAML runtime apps. Just before I leave this, if you wanted to, the easy way to add the default, the navigation helper, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So this is a preview. You can add an existing item to a project that hasn't got navigation key handling in it. Add a new item, sorry. If you add a page of type of basic page, it will put a pop-up and it says, this needs some other files. Can we add them? You'd always say yes. And it will stick into your project a bunch of files called navigation helper, observable dictionary, readme, and relay command, which are useful on suspension manager. We're going to talk a lot about these over the next couple of modules, particularly navigation helper in just a minute. But that's just to show you how you can easily add it. I mean, I've got a page. You can almost do that. If you want those classes and don't want the page, you can add the page and then delete the page again. You've still got the kind of utility classes, so that's a nice way of adding them in. So, why did I show you that? Well, before, I'll talk about a couple of things. Page cache mode first. There's this thing about a page, this is just really, don't worry about this, just so you're aware of it, is that when you navigate forward to a page, obviously the first time your app does that, you're going to create a new instance of that page. And then you might navigate to another page and then go back to you, and then you'll do another forward navigation to the page of the same type. This navigation cache mode simply controls whether you just reuse the same instance of the page object you created before, which is .navigation cache mode .required, which is actually set into all the new project templates. That's kind of the de facto standard for phone projects. Or if it's navigation cache mode .disabled, then you will always get a new instance. It will just always blow away the old one. You get a new instance always all the time. But there's kind of obviously a slight performance implication of that, which is why I think the new project template set required by default. And then there's this enabled one, which is kind of required, but there's also limited by this frame.cache size property. Don't worry about it. It just means that you do have to, I'll show you why it makes a difference. It means you have to manage the state yourself. So if you navigate forward to a page and you get the same instance back, it will have the same values in the controls that when last time you left it. So it does mean you just have to write the correct code to reset the state on a page if you've got required. So this is kind of what we're going to be talking about more in the application lifecycle session in session 5. But what you are going to do is save and restore page state on navigation. So if you want to go forwards to a page and then you go to some other page and then you obviously go back, you'll probably would expect page 2 to look the same as you left it, probably. With navigation cache mode disabled, you'll get a whole new instance when you navigation back, so that won't be the case. This is why you need to care about this. But with navigation cache mode enabled or required, you'll get the same instance and that will just work. And like I said, required is the kind of de facto standard anyway. But you need to be aware of this, and this whole state, what the page looks like when the user navigates to it, does make a difference. The way that you handle that, there's two methods called onNavigated to and onNavigated from, where you put the code to handle this. And I'll show you a bit of an example in a minute. I showed you this. This is how you can get the navigation helper, which helps you with all of this sort of thing. So let's just go off to that and show an example of this. So this is a new one where the I've got my on navigate. Let's just show you it running first. This app is got a main page which just has a button on it, and you go to page 2. And this one we could actually put some values in, so we can go, ooh, hello, world, just to be unoriginal. And you can set a radio button. So I'm going to set radio button 2, and then you can go to page 3, and then we go back, and it's all set. You've got the same values, and that's good. And then we go back, and you can go forwards again, and it's still set like that. Now, you might imagine that should be empty because we've done a forward navigation. Depends on the app. This is a very simple example, but the app scenario is that you should expect that page to have been reinitialized at that point. Why did all that happen? Well, I've got this sample has got this navigation helper in it. Navigation helper has all of this stuff. It's got loads of comments in that tells you how to use it, but it's got all of the hardware buttons, backpress stuff wired into it, so you don't have to worry about it. So all you need to do is have your pages wired up to it, and all of these pages have been set up to do that. The way that you do it is you basically have a class member of it, and those comments in Navigation Helper tell you how to do this. And this is when you add a basic page, this is how it's set up. There's that navigation cache mode required, and this is where it wires up a couple of Navigation Helper events on it, load state and save state. And basically the idea is that on save state, when you're leaving the page, you will save state associated with the page, transient state. It's like what the user has put into controls, what data they've entered but haven't saved yet. This becomes really important when we start looking at the life cycle and stuff that's been terminated. But I don't want to talk about that now. And then load state is used to load stuff back in. But you might want to, this state object, the important thing about the navigation helper, so you wire it in by simply in onNavigated2, you call this.navigationhelper.onNavigated2 method, and in onNavigatedFrom you call this.navigationhelper.onNavigatedFrom. And this is the process by which you wire your page into the navigation helper, and you get that back key handling for free. So that's kind of a quick introduction to the navigation helper. We're definitely going to come back to that, and you'll see how that works when we get to the page lifecycle session. Okay, very important topic, and I haven't got a lot of time to talk about it, so this is going to be a challenge. Data binding. So, you know, in our Contosa cookbook, we started off by writing, we had that ridiculous text block where we put all the instructions into it, this big long bit of text. And of course you can do that in XAML, you can do that in code, but that's kind of unwieldy, and it's not the way you're going to build a professional app. So what you need to do, because if you start doing that, you're going to soon end up with massively complex code, and the app is unmaintainable, and it will be error prone. You can't do that. So you need to use data binding is a much better way of doing that. What you need to do is create a class which has a special purpose. We call these classes view models. So this class exposes properties on it, and in its simplest, what you do is the display properties and input display controls and input controls on your page. Use this thing called XAML data binding to bind to those properties, so that when the user interacts with the page, they see the values of the properties that are exposed by that view model displayed, and when they enter text, like clicking a radio button or selecting an item in a list or doing anything like that, or entering stuff into a text box, then those changes are automatically sent back to the view model. So this is a binding statement. So instead of having text equals 14 lines of text, like we had in the directions for building our recipe, instead you bind to a property on a class called directions. This statement doesn't say what the object is where that directions property can be found. The way that is defined is by a different property called data context, which you can set on any control, but typically you'll set that on the page of the page control. There are data binding modes. The default is one way, which means whenever the property, your logic, changes the values exposed by the properties in your view model class, your UI will automatically update. One time is a variant on that, which means just when the page first renders, go and get those values, but thereafter don't track any changes in the view model properties. One way it means track the values in the view model properties, and two-way means that when the user enters something into like a text box, that's written back to the underlying view model. The beauty of all of this is that this is all done in XAML data binding statements. Your view model object doesn't know anything about the view, the XAML page. It's a nicely decoupling. It ends up with much neater and cleaner code. How does a data binding, how does a view manage to get alerted that a property has been updated in your view model by some background logic, or by some logic you're running in a task, or you've gone off to get some data from the web and you've updated your view model? The way that a view model does that is it's very simple. There's nothing magic about this. It's just firing an event whenever a property changes, and that event is called property changed. That behavior is encapsulated in this interface called iNotifyPropertyChanged. So that iNotifyPropertyChanged interface simply says any class that implements this must have a property changed event. What happens is the view actually subscribes to that event and gets notified, and whenever that event fires, it will go off to the view model and find out what has changed. So this is what it looks like. Here's my the view actually subscribes to the property changed event, and so whenever anything changes, like property A or property B, then like property A has changed here, it fires the property changed event. The view will get that because it's subscribed to the event, and it will go off and pull the new value of property A from your view model and update the UI. That's in simplicity what it is. Now the way that you do this is you need to instrument your setters. So here's a public property called ID, and you'll notice that in the setter, whenever that value changes, we call a method called notifyPropertyChanged which fires that property changed event, and it gives the name of that property. This is the old way of doing it. It's kind of error prone because this is what we call an example using magic strings. If you ever use the nice refactoring tools and change the name of that property, which it will nicely do throughout your app, what it will not do is change that hard-coded string in there to the new name of your property. So you have to do that manually. This is a cause of great frustration to XAML-based developers for a good long time. So the new way of doing it is to use this rather wacky thing called the caller member name attribute. This is the way you do it. The logic from the middle of the page down there, the property change logic, that's kind of boilerplate logic. And typically you put that in a base class, and then you inherit from that base class from your actual view model. It has the same effect. It fires the property changed event whenever the setter changes. It just automatically gets the value of the property that's calling it and throws that out as to the consumer. So you don't have this magic strings problem. Lists can bind to collections of objects in the same way. You have this item source equals property, but you will set that to a collection of objects rather than so an item view data context is like a single object. Item source is a collection of objects. So that's for lists. We're going to talk about that in the next session. So this is an example of an observable collection of objects. We've got a few data binding improvements in XAML. So target null value, so you can bind to a different property if the source property, the main one you're binding to, returns a null value, or you can specify a fallback value to use instead. This whole thing I've been talking about, this data binding, actually is the most important ingredient of a wider pattern called MVVM, which I'm not going to dive into now because frankly you'd need a whole day for it. But this is the kind of cornerstone, the foundation of MVVM, where you have strict separation of concerns. We have the M is model, which is your data. VM, of course, is your view models, and view are your XAML pages, and it's an architectural pattern that is a good way of organizing your Windows Store apps. Very quickly, I'm going to show you a sort of before and after demo because I'm kind of out of time. So you've already seen the before version before. So I'm just going to simply switch to the data binding end one and run it. And this one works just the same as before, but has some very important differences. There's our French macaroons, and it's got our nice ingredients in there. But if you dig into the way that has worked, is our main page now has got a lot of binding statements in it. Let's go and find them. Here we've got our header is bound to the text that show in the header is bound to a property called short title, and the down in here we've got the directions is bound to a property called directions. The prep time is to prep time. So you get the idea. So we've removed that hard coding in there. Where is that object? I've now added into this project something called the recipe data source, which if you dig down into it, we've got some classes called a recipe data item. Here's a recipe data item which has a bunch of properties on it. This is the view model, prep time, directions, which has got the data in it. The data actually comes from a JSON file, and we are simply going to in the logic for this on the onNavigated 2, we simply call a method on recipe data source called getItem, which returns a single recipe data item object, which is this guy, and we're going to set that as the data context of our page. And that's how the magic works. We've removed all that hard coding. All right, I'm going to stop at that point. That's a very quick, too short introduction to data binding, but we're going to use this all the time now, data binding, for all the remaining samples. It's the only way to build these apps.
Yeah, we're going to see a lot of it in the next session.
Okay, so we'll be back in a few minutes, and Matthias is thankfully going to take over, and I'm going to thank Lord for that. And I'm going to, he's going to run you through programming the list controls.
Yep.
See you in a minute.
And welcome back to Windows Phone Jumpstart. This session that we're covering now is we're going to talk about lists and list items and how we work with them in Windows Phone in the Windows Phone XAML framework. So, in this module, we're going to cover list controls. Which different controls can we use to manage big lists of objects and items, and what the capabilities those controls have. We're going to go through how do we create these list items, not just creating how we display our data, but also what capabilities, how we change and alter the visual style of those capabilities. Then we're going to dig in deep, look at grouped lists and grouping navigation, often called a jump list. And then last, we're going to cover really long lists. We're talking hundreds, maybe thousands of objects. And how do we deal with that? How do we get the best performance possible out of our lists? So first, let's start looking at some list controls. What do we have available for us in Windows Phone XAML? And this is actually almost everything you're going to see here is Windows Phone XAML, Windows Phone as well as Windows. And I'll try to make some call-outs when we deal with things that are a little bit different on the Windows and Windows Phone sides. But for the most part, everything you're looking here is going to be pretty universal. So the first kind of control we have is a list view, and this is going to be just straight up and down lists of objects. Grid view is going to be, it's going to render to the side and then wrap around. We'll look at a little bit of that. There still is a list box. If you are a Silverlight developer or you're an WPF developer and you've used a list box since nigh on 6 years, it's still there, but it doesn't have all the capabilities that we have with list view and grid view. I would consider it more.
I discovered it's also not theme aware. So
it's not theme aware. It is a last resort. If it's something that maybe you've got some legacy code and you just don't want to rip out all of your templates, you don't want to go through all of that work again, you can use your list box. It's still there. So the list view, as I said, it's a vertical list of items. It's good for these simple lists as well as for group lists, and the layout format is simply top to bottom, one on top of another. The grid view is a grid of items, and we're looking usually at image-based items here. So if you've got something, you've got a nice square image that you want to display for it, you can put the image in there with a smaller amount of text, and this is going to render from left to right and then down to another row, left to right, down to another row.
This is a nice one for adapting to bigger screen display and sizes and
Yep.
stuff. Yeah.
Yep. This one works particularly well with Windows over Windows Phone. But both of these controls are built kind of the same way. There's a giant pile of templates that you can use to style your control to make it act a certain all the ways we want it to act. And I'm going to go through those controls really quickly here. Or those different templates really quickly here. First, we have header and footer templates. And the header and footer templates are just simple top of my list, bottom of my list sorts of templates. They're very simple. There's not a lot of interaction you can do with those. We've got the item template, and the item template is what's the data of the object that I'm showing. That's where I define which data am I going to show and what's it going to look like. We have the item container style for our list control, and that has nothing to do with the data inside the item. Instead, it is dealing with the style, the state that the data is in. So there can be many different states. We'll talk about that in a little more depth in a moment. The items panel, which defines how our items are going to be laid out inside list control. And then if we're grouping our items, we have a group style, which has a group container style and a group header template. And that's going to define the style of what do the headers of our different groups look like when they're rendered. So starting with our headers and footers,
It's probably worth saying that. I mean, it sounds kind of scary, all these templates, but in many cases, you only need one of them, which is the item template, the data template.
Yeah. For the most part, most of the work that we're doing is happening in the item template. That's where we say, my object looks like this. I want these data properties to show up, and that's pretty much all you want to do. But the list view and grid view are enormously extensible controls, and there's just they're enormously powerful, and there's a lot of stuff we can do with it. So the header template always displays at the top of your list. The footer template always at the bottom of the list. This seems kind of obvious. The styles that you see in here are not our recommended styles. That sort of faded color. But the reason it looks like that is because I wanted to show that these are completely stylable. And so you don't have to simply have a piece of text with a standard color at the top or the bottom with your header or your footer. You could, let's say you're loading 50 objects at a time. And when the user gets to the bottom of those objects, they want to load more. Well, you could make your footer a button. It could just be a button, and when you tap the button, it loads a bunch more items. Or maybe it points to an app bar item that allows you to load that. So this it doesn't have to be very standard. It's fully stylable, fully templatable. The item template is where we live most of our lives. Here you see a list view item template as well as a grid view item template, and it just simply displays the item data. The images that we see here are images that are associated with the object. They've been rendered on the left-hand side for the list view item template, and then they take up the bulk of the template with the grid view. List items also have an item container style. And this defines how the item is going to look when it's in a different state. These states could be multiple selection mode or the reorder mode. You can see that we've changed the opacity a little bit. It looks different when it's selected versus unselected. And it even supports different styles for data virtualization of the item. The item container style is a powerful element, and it does a lot of things. But you can just leave it alone, and you'll get all the default styles that your list item should look like according to the Windows Phone designers, a sharp group of people. The items panel, generally speaking, you're just going to want to leave this one alone, but for the sake of comprehensive information. It manages the item by item layout. So with the list view, you have an item stack panel with the orientation vertical. With the grid view, you have an items wrap panel with an orientation vertical or horizontal. And yeah, you can go in and change these. You're going to lose a lot of the virtualization that's built into the controls. So my recommendation, leave this one alone. Okay, so that's an overview of the templates that we have available. Let's look a little bit at the capabilities that these list controls give us. We can do some really cool stuff like reordering. And when we shift our list view or grid view into a reordering mode, our items shift into this floating UI. We can reorder very simply by just tapping on an item and then dragging it up or down the list, or with a grid view, it would be across our list. There's a little bit of a difference between Windows and Windows Phone here. To switch into reorder mode with Windows Phone, we change the reorder mode property on our list view to be list view reorder mode .enabled. Whereas with Windows, we change the property can reorder items from true to false or false to true, and that'll change the whether or not we're actively reordering the list. One note here, group lists cannot be reordered, so only a straight list of objects is going to be able to be reordered in a list view or in a grid view. We have support for multi-selection, and multi-selection just displays checkboxes for multi-selection and then hides the checkboxes for single selection. You get some really great styles depending on whether you're in list view or grid view. But the other thing that this gives you is when you switch between one or the other, you get a cool little animation where the checkbox comes in, slides in from the side, slides out from the side. Changing that is very simple. Just change the selection mode on your list view or grid view to list view selection mode .multiple. So let's look at the demo for creating. We're going to look at creating a list item template, and we'll jump a little bit into working with our item container style. But not too much because it's really complex. Okay, so here is, I'm just going to go ahead and run this application, Windows Phone. And when you get to this sample, you will be able to look at how this, see how this looks. This is a universal project. All the stuff that I'm showing you is stuff that works across Windows and Windows Phone. So go ahead and run this. Pull it up, here it comes. We're going to take a look at our list view. Now this is just a list view with a binding. We have no list templates in here. We're simply bound to...
So what we're seeing there is, well, that's just the type of the, it dumps the type of the object out.
Exactly, exactly. With no item template in place, it basically calls the toString method of whatever object you have, and it dumps that string as a text inside of here. That's actually good information to know, because you could override the toString method in your object and give a better really simple way of dealing with that. Yeah. So let's stop that, and let's go ahead and we're going to open up our document outline. Oh, there we go. Open up our document outline. We're going to right-click on our sample list view. We're going to edit additional templates. Edit the item template. So you see all the templates that I've been talking about. Yeah. They're actually right there. We can kind of discover it just by right-clicking and walking through this. I already have a template. We're not going to build a whole new template, so we'll just take a look at our sample data template. And then we can go and edit that if we want here. I'm just going to edit that to pull up the data template. We can take a look. It's just a simple grid. We've got an image in there. The image has a binding. We've got a couple of text blocks, one for our title, one for our subtitle. So with that in place...
So what you're saying is every item in this list that's going to be displayed will be laid out in a little grid of its own, using its own text block and another text block.
Yep. And so...
And the image, yeah.
And that's what we get. There's we have our image. We have a simple binding for the text, for the title, for the subtitle. And now we have a list view that looks great.
Yep.
And has gotten started. We can tap on these buttons down here, and this is the mode that I was showing earlier. This is multiple select mode. We can select, make it go away, turn it on. But let's say we wanted to change the color of that checkbox, picking something really simple, so that we can do it quickly.
So this is about customizing one of the built-in templates.
Right. So we're changing the not the items themselves, but how the items are being displayed when they're in a particular mode.
All right.
So this is actually most easily done inside of Blend, and I'll show why in a minute.
So we haven't mentioned Blend. We probably ought to say that when you get the SDK, you actually get two fully fledged developer tools. Yeah.
Right. So
Visual Studio that we've been using up to now, and then Blend, which is kind of
Visual Studio Blend, and it's considered a kind of a designer tool.
Yeah.
It's got some really powerful features, and one of those features is the ability to visually edit the Visual State Manager. And the item container style relies very heavily on the Visual State Manager to pick to show which designs we want to show in any given state. And so we're going to say this is our list view item container style, and this is going to pull a copy of that item container style out of our generic.xaml we showed earlier and just kind of dump it into our local resources. Now what we see here is here's our states tab, and these are all the visual states that a list view item can support. We have normal, press, disabled, pointer over. We have focus states, drag states, selection hint states. There's a lot of different. There's a lot of power in our list view.
It's kind of when you said how you get that nice animation as when you turn the multi-select on and off. You know, well, hey, that doesn't come for free.
Yeah. So it's
designed somewhere.
It's a really powerful control. But what we're going to look at is our list view multiple select. You see how it pulls up the state that we go into when we're in a list view multiple select, and we can just walk through the visual tree here. And here's the rectangle that I was talking about. And we're just going to do something really silly. We're just going to change some of the colors. We're going to change the stroke color to blue. And that's all we're going to do. We don't need to change anything else about the state. We just need to change one property with the list multi-select selected inside of our Visual State Manager. We save that, and if we go and reload it, you can see that we have that state now for our checkbox. And so you can do a lot with this. You can completely rebuild the entire list box if you want, the entire list box item container style. But I just wanted to show the easiest way to go in that and maybe do a little bit of exploring is to jump into Blend and use that Visual State Manager to do that. So we're going to jump back to our presentation. And now we're going to talk a little bit about grouped lists. Lists are great, but grouped lists are better. If you have a really big data set and you want to group it according to a particular property, grouped lists are a great way of doing that. Grouping data requires a little bit of a change to our data source. Before we were simply binding to an observable collection or maybe a list of data. But if we're going to be grouping our data, we actually need to bind it to a collection view source. We technically can bind it to a list of lists. If you do this, you won't get a jump list. There will be no way of navigating through that, and it'll be very confusing for the user, so don't.
So collection view source is this fancy list of lists
which
that enables all this extra behavior.
Which I'm going to show in just a minute.
Right.
So in addition, if you want the jump lists, and you do, then there are two kinds of jump lists. There's a keyed list, which is what you see over at the side, over on the right-hand side, where we see a pile of businesses, Fabricam, Contoso, Fourth Coffee, Graphic Design, and they're aligned in a list. The other kind of jump list we can have is an alpha key group, and that's an alphabetic group where we've arranged all of our items alphabetically, and we can just we can navigate through them from A to Z, much like we would in the context portion of the native application, the native contacts application. With the key list, we would start with a list of data, and we'd use a keyed list class. Now, a keyed list class is something that we have inside of the demo. It's also kind of out there in the wild because it was used to build grouped lists in Windows Phone 8. So if you look up a keyed list and the long list selector, which was the proper control in Windows Phone 8, you'll be able to find this out there. We take our single list and we format that using the following link query, and we'll walk through that here. our items is the variable for our simple list of items. Okay, so we're going to select that list of items. We're going to order it by some property that we want to sort by. Then we're going to group it by that property. And finally, we're going to select a keyed list of our objects from the result of that order and group. Then lastly, we can dump that into a list or observable collection of keyed lists. And so every single one of these items, fourth copy, is actually a keyed list of sampled items. The Margie's Travel is a keyed list of sampled items. So what we're actually binding to is a list of keyed lists of sample items.
The headache in all this is just getting your data structured.
Right.
Once you got it right, you just throw it at the control. And
exactly. Yeah, once it's a little bit of work to get this put together. Once it's put together, you get a really beautiful user interaction and a really powerful control. The alpha key group is, again, we'll start with our list of data. We create the alpha key group class. And the alpha key group class is more complex than the keyed list, but it is much easier to work with because our grouping is simply, we call this method alpha key group with the kind of item we're using, sample item, dot create groups, and we give it our list of items, and we give it the property we want to sort on, and we give it, and then we say, yes, we want to order their items, order these items, and it will hand back exactly the sort of list that we can bind to.
Yeah. Okay, it does all the work for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then last little piece of this is that collection view source, where once we've set a data context on our page where we can see that object, we can place the collection view source in our resources, and we set the source to the property, the object we want to bind to, and the source equals binding. And then inside of our list view, we bind to that static resource that we had created. In our collection view source, if we've used a keyed list or we've used an alpha key group, the items path is always internal list. The is source group is always true. So that's the data structure that we need in order to do grouping. Now, the grouping style and templates. Previously, we had a jump list style in Windows Phone 8. That is changed so that now we're using this group style. If you're a Windows 8 developer, you're familiar with this already. We can take the group style. Hide if empty is true. You see an example of that is in the far left-hand object here. We have nothing that starts with the letter B. And so we don't want to show the B group because it's empty. And so that's what hides if empty set to true does. Then we have our group style header template, and you can kind of do anything you want. Generally, it's just a box for alphabetic and a line for your keyed list. The real important part is you need a text block in there that binds to the key, because that is the thing that you have grouped by.
So if you don't do that, you won't see the key.
Exactly. And so then we have a semantic zoom control, and this is how we do our group list navigation. We have a semantic group zoom control. If you're familiar with from the Windows Phone 8 or from Windows 8, you could do this sort of pinch zoom, and you would go into a zoomed out view. You could go into a zoomed in view. Well, with Windows Phone, we're not using that. We don't use that pinch zoom. But we still have a zoomed in view and a zoomed out view, and it's designed specifically for this list view and grid view control navigation. Inside the zoomed in view, we've got our list view or grid view, and the item source binds to that collection view source just like we've seen. In the zoomed out view, it's a list view or a grid view, and the items source is bound to the same collection view source, but with a path to the collection groups. The zoomed in view is whatever default view, whatever outline or however we've placed that semantic zoom. So in this case, you see here, it's probably in a grid. It's in a grid, and it respects all the margins, and it respects all the boundaries, and it respects all the grid rows and columns that it's been placed in. But the zoomed out view is triggered by that group interaction, and it always overlays the entire screen as a flyout. has a transparent background. So one thing you might want to do is make it a semi-transparent background to try to cut out some of that visual noise.
So what you're saying is when you tap on one of the grids, you're going to show us now. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
When you tap on one of the groups,
Right.
then it zooms out. You get the zoomed out view where you can select all the different from the wider group collection of groups.
Yep. And so I'm going to, as quickly as possible, walk through the creation. So here we have our group grid view, and you can see right now we don't have the semantic zoom hooked up. So we have that interaction. It looks like it should be doing something when I tap on the A, when I tap on the C.
So this is like all we're seeing here is the zoomed in view, the default view.
Right, this is a default. This is just a grid view with no semantic zoom in place.
Yeah.
So let's go over to jump over to my, I should have, that's apparently not going to do that. Let's take a quick look at our collection view source. And this is what we're seeing, where we have the sources grouped, we have the items path to the internal path, and the source is to an alpha grouped property that we have in our view model. And now I'm going to have to scroll down to the sample. Okay, so here's the grid view that we were looking at. We have our item source, we have our items template, and the header template. As I said before, the key part of this is that we have a text block that's bound to the key. Now we have some semantic zoom elements commented, and we're just going to uncomment there. So now we have our semantic zoom, and the grid view that we had before is inside the zoomed in view.
Okay.
Inside the zoomed out view is another grid view. The item source is the same as the item source for our first grid view, with this path equals collection groups. Path equals collection groups at the end of it. And that's important. It's important that our grid views or our list views in the zoomed in view and zoomed out view are bound to the same thing, because otherwise the semantic view won't know what to do when it zooms in and out. And you can see instead of, you can see that in the item template, we are binding to, the text is bound to the binding group.key. And so with all of those bindings and with all of those grid views in place, if we run the application, and we go to our group grid view. Now, if we tap on A, you see that we've got the ability to quickly navigate between our many different items using that alphanumeric navigation. So that's a whirlwind overview of lists and the different templates that we can do, and how to do the grouping and how to do our jump list navigation. Let's touch really quickly on some of our list best practices. When we do item rendering group visualization, our group layouts are virtualized. And so the control already knows how big each group needs to be, even if it hasn't rendered all the items inside of that group. The list control renders elements not necessarily in the viewport, but near the viewport. And so there's a certain buffer above and below the items that we can see, where those items have also been rendered in anticipation of the user scrolling down to them, so scrolling down or up to them. But if we have a really long list, then we're going to want to do something called progressive item rendering. And this means that maybe if we're scrolling really, really fast, the items that we have, they don't have enough time to render in. And that's if we're using something called unphased rendering, where basically it's all or nothing. Either none of your item is visible, or the entire item is visible, every data element inside of it, every image. A great way to try to speed up our list and try to help the user is by implementing a phased rendering. And with a phased rendering, we can say, first thing that we want is a placeholder a placeholder color just in place. Very simple, a simple square, something that's easy to render and very fast. Then we want the most important textual information for our item. Then maybe the second most important, and then finally, because the images take the longest to pull up and longest to render, do those last. And that way, we give the user something that they can see, they can hold on to, they can get ready as the image is coming in.
So this is while it's whizzing past your eyes very fast, because you're like you're swiping like a crazy thing.
Right, exactly.
So you'll see a blue blur go past, but
right, you'll see a blue blur, and then if you're pulling, especially if you're using very high resolution images, and this is something that's important for phone because we're dealing with small, lower resources. But if we have really big images and we're working on a Windows application, then when we're scrolling across, it could take a while to pull all of those images up, and so this phased rendering gives the user a lot better experience. So how do we do that? We can do it with this thing called container content changing, and this fires whenever the item is realized. Whenever the system looks at at any individual's item and says, "Whoa, I need to render that item." The item can then be rendered in phases. Here's the event handler. You see, we set the args.handled equals true, and the first phase we come to is going to be phase 0. We will always come to phase 0 first. And then we can do things like we can show a placeholder shape and then register an update callback and for the next phase of rendering.
So you just keep registering callbacks.
And
wait when you've got more to show. Then
yep,
stop
and you can.
When you've...
Yep, and what this will and what this event handler does is it goes in, it renders the first thing. It says, "Do I have any more resources available? If I do, it'll go to the next callback. If it doesn't, it won't go to the next callback." So it's pretty cool that way. Yeah, and the later phases will be skipped if too much time is needed, as you can see here. So first, we want to show the text, then we want to show an image. Phase priorities are, as I mentioned before, simple shapes, those placeholder visuals I was talking about. Try to keep those non-opacity, simple colors, blocks, squares, and rectangles. Then the key text, then other text, and then lastly, the images. One tip is that when you're hiding and showing these items inside of your item template, do not use visibility, because when you change the visibility from collapsed to visible, the layout system looks at that and says, "Oh, wait a second, the whole thing has changed, I need to render everything all over again." Yeah. And so you lose all of the performance benefits you got by using that container changing event.
But it's quite happy to say, okay, this item's still there, but it's just got a visibility of 0. So
right. Yeah. Whenever the opacity is set to the opacity is set to 0, the renderer looks at that and says, "I don't care.
It's still there, but
yep.
Whatever." Yeah.
So I'm gonna run through this as quickly as possible because we're coming up on a meal break here. And I'm actually just going to show this, show the code that we have available for this. So if we go down to our, apparently when I don't have the design mode open, it won't let me do this. Okay, so here's the list view that we have that's rendering all the objects that we've been seeing in the previous demos. We can do this content container changing, and you see we already have an incremental update handler in there. We get that, and we go to our list view page, and here is our incremental update. Now the way that we work with this is I have for my own help, this is what my item looks like, along with all of the names.
Handy little diagram.
Right, names of all the items I have in there. The first thing we do is we grab our item container and grab the content template root. That's going to be a grid. And then using that template root, we can find all of the objects that are inside of our item template. So we grab copies of all of those objects, or references to all those objects. We make our placeholder visible, and then we make our item image, our title, and our subtitle invisible.
Right.
And we say we want another callback, and we can show the first piece of text. We go in here, and you see we're in phase 1. So make sure we're in phase 1. And in this case, we're actually going to be grabbing the sample item along with the item
So
container.
the first one didn't even have any data.
Yeah, the first one, it was nothing but a placeholder visual.
But now we're interested in the data of this object. Yeah.
Yep. So we grab our template root, we grab the object that is our title, and we're actually setting the title manually. And this is because we're interested entirely in performance here. And the data binding, while it is awesome, can slow us down if we're data binding for every single object. And so we're going to use explicitly set the title on that.
You MVVM zealots, you're going to have to put aside your objections at this point.
Right.
Performance.
This is all about the performance.
Yeah.
And so we set that text, we set that opacity, and we register another update. And in this case, we're only going to register these 3 different render phases.
And this is the last one, so there's no new callback.
Right, we don't need another callback on this. This is phase 2. We get our item, we get our template root, we get all the objects that we want to change, the image, the text block. In this case, we want the placeholder to go away because everything has been loaded in. So we set all of our data, we set all of our opacity, and I'm going to run this, and it'll take 5 seconds, I hope, to show it. But inside our list view, I'm not sure. I'm not even sure I can run it fast enough to get that performance hit. But it is happening in there. If we set the a breakpoint, you'd see all of the data coming in. Yeah. And so this is for people who really, really need the highest possible performance out of their list views. Is you can implement this phase rendering to make that happen.
Right. Nice.
So. That's it for lists and list items. We covered the controls. We covered the creating list items, the group list, the group navigation, and then some of the high performance best practices that we have available. We're going to take a break now. I've gone a little bit over. We're taking a meal break, but we will return at the top of the next hour.
See you then.
Thank you for joining us.
Hi, welcome back. So we enjoyed a nice break there. Hope you did too. This afternoon we're going to finish off this story of the Windows Runtime XAML app. So we've got 4 short but sweet sessions. First of all, the one we're about to do, programming page controls and page transition animations. Then we're going to look at the app life, the way that you design for different size displays and orientations. The app lifecycle, also very important, and then with a little short bit on localization, and then that'll wrap up. And then for the rest of the afternoon, from the last 2 hours, we've got 2 really important and exciting sessions, which is about data and all the things you can do with that, and what's the last one?
Data and
whatever. There's another one.
Something else.
Yeah, something else after that. But it's good. Oh yeah, sharing and file pickers and stuff, which is kind of related. So those 2 sessions are the first 2 that kind of get into leave just the XAML story behind, and we get into the Windows Runtime APIs, which are available to Silverlight and to Windows Runtime XAML app developers. And that's going to be the course for tomorrow as well. We're talking about background tasks, the tiles, the notification center, geofencing. Contacts and calendars, enterprise, that's good stuff there. Masses of great stuff. So anyway, this session, is about, I'm going to look at the bigger page controls, the kind of page controls and page transition animations. So in this one, we're going to just look at the basic templates and then a little bit about how you can control that, setting page orientation. Bit of a look at what the pivot control and hub control give you in terms of the kind of user experience. And then how you can add a little bit of nice quality gloss onto where your apps behave. As you've already seen, we've got a lot of great animations out of the box. The controls come out of the box and they look great straight as you go. But you can do a little bit more about manipulating the way they behave and some of the stuff they look like. So we'll look at that. So first of all, page controls. Just a bit of summary first. We've been creating that Contoso cookbook. We use the blank page. That is simply a blank page. It has no real it has no UI on it, and there's no logic behind it. The basic page I showed you, which is that one that is wired into the navigation helper and also the suspension helper, which we will look at some more session after next when we get into the app lifecycle. So we saw about how you add that, and it brings in all those other classes, which helps you with navigation support and some state management stuff. Page orientation. So Windows Phone apps, Windows Phone devices, people can use them in portrait and landscape, and of course that's true for tablet apps as well, portrait or landscape. If your app wants to only be available to the user, it only makes sense to show it in one orientation, you can do that in two ways. You can set it for the whole app by going into the app manifest, and you can see the app manifest graphic there, and just check underneath if you only support a specific orientation. And then that's the only one it will show in. So the user launches the app and it will come up in that orientation. So that's app-wide. If you've got a specific page that that only wants to be displayed in a specific orientation, then you can use this display information.auto rotation preferences property. And you can set that to display orientations.portrait or to .landscape left or .landscape right. And that will set it for the page. And if you look at this code here, you would set that on the on-navigated to coming into the page, and then don't forget to unset it again when you leave the page in on-navigated from, because if you don't unset it, that's set for the app thereafter. It will stick in whatever orientation you set. So that's just a little information about orientation. Right, now I'm going to dig into the bigger page controls, and these are ones that sit in that right-hand category for when we are looking at the whole broad collection of controls. These are the kind of trademark controls that you use for creating great user experiences. So this is the pivot, only on the phone. We don't have this on big Windows. And for Windows Phone 8 Silverlight developers who will be used to this, it actually looks the same, and you've got the same guidelines. So what are the usage guidance? So a pivot is used where you've got discrete pages of information that are all related. So the user will swipe from left to right across the screen, and we will reveal the next page worth of information. It's often used for where you've got some data which can be viewed in different sortings. The classical example of that is if you think about in the Music Hub, when you look at an artist, you can look at their albums or you can look at their tracks, and you can swipe from one to the left and you can see different sortings. Or in the Mail app, for example, if you look at all mail, or you can swipe across and just see unread mail, swipe across again, you see high priority mail. So that's the kind of usage scenario. That's different filtered views of the same data set. And in the way that you use it is you have your page object, the class object, the pivot page, and inside that you have a grid, the container control. So you must always have a single control inside the page, which is the container for everything else. And then inside that, you just stick a pivot. And the pivot actually fills the whole of that page control. And that pivot consists of, you give a title, which just ends up as the same as the application title on the top, and then you have one or more pivot items, and a pivot item is the content area for each pivot pane, if you like. So you then just design your UI in that just the same as if you were designing the content area on a regular page, as grids or stack panels or however you want to design out that control. So I've got a new iteration of our old friend, the Contoso cookbook, and this one has been rewritten to use the pivot, and it uses some of Matthias's lists as well. So we're really starting to build together all the content for this control. It's starting to look pretty good. So let's just run it first. And we'll show this on the emulator. And it's coming up now. There we go. And now we've got regions, and you tap on a region and it will take you to the region page, and then you can swipe across from left to right, and we go there's the landing page for a particular group, and there's the recipes, and you can go and tap on a particular item, and we're into our this is the same recipe detail page that we created before, with one big difference, and that is that the ingredients is no longer a horrible flyout from the app bar, which was convenient for keeping it a single page example. But this pivot now, you scroll across and you get the ingredients. And notice how the headers here, you see the header for the next section is kind of bleeding into the display. So you can see that there's something to the right. It's grayed out, something that begins with recipe. And so it's a hint to the user that if they swipe across, they're going to see more. So it's a really nice user experience, and then we can go back and back again, and there's our main list of regions. How is that built out? So let's have a look at that recipe detail page. Let's stop that, and then we can have a good look at this. So here's the XAML for the recipe detail page, and you can see, okay, we've got our app bar at the top there. And then here's our outer grid, which contains everything on the page, and inside it all we've got is this pivot. We've got the title, which is the Contoso cookbook title, and then underneath it we've got a number of pivot items. In fact, we've got two pivot items. So first of all, got the recipe pivot item, which is the recipe details, and inside that we've just defined all the content as a grid with text blocks, images, the same stuff actually we had on that single page display when we defined the simple example a couple of modules back. So the same content, but then underneath that we've got a separate pivot item 2, and this is the ingredients one, which just has a list view in it, and inside we've got a data template. So we're binding to the ingredients list. And this is what we're looking at. Where's it gone? Contoso cookbook. And here we go. Oh gosh, which one is it? Should have been practicing this. That's not quite what I had in mind. Yeah, okay. So, and yeah, so here we go. And these are the two. That's the first pivot item, and that's the second pivot item. So it's a real nice way of, and all of these controls, they make really good use of the limited physical size of the screen. You know, you've got this physical screen, which is a phone screen, but by clever use of controls like this, what you're giving the impression to the user is they've got a window onto a wider canvas of interesting information behind. Okay. So that's the pivot. The hub it's kind of related. It's the big brother, if you like. This is really, really rich content, and you can see how graphically rich this is with lovely background images and some menus of items over it. This has some similarity to the panorama control that Windows Phone 8 Silverlight developers will be used to using, and it fills the same kind of usage scenario. So the different islands of information on this don't have to be page sized, they can be variably sized, and there's no conformity kind of expected from this. Think of this like a magazine cover with lots of great color content on it and little boxes of information that you can use to navigate to different interesting places. So and this is the landing, it's a real landing page of your app, and the idea is you make the landing page visually stunning and it draws users into using it. Again, like the pivot that has pivot items, this one has sections within it that you design up individually. But the control and layout and all the nice usage, the nice touch and feel, the nice swipey navigation and animations, all built into it. This is the designer view. So on the top left, obviously, you can see what it looks like for big windows, and then on the lower side, you've got what it looks like for the phone. But it's the same control, and this is a great example of one that allows you. This one allows you as a designer to easily adapt to an appropriate layout for the particular device where the app is running. This is an example of the XAML. Again, we've got our page, and inside we've got a single grid. But in there, like the pivot, you've just got a single hub control. And inside the hub, well, first of all, we've got hub background. So hub background and an image brush. So that's where you want to put your image Don't put it on the background of the page, because if you put it on the hub background, you get the nice parallax effect. I'll show you an example in a minute, which is this kind of 3D depth to it. And the background image also scrolls across the screen as the user is using it. And then you have one or more hub sections in the same similar way to pivot items. But like I said, each hub section can be variable. It doesn't have to be a page width. It could be wider, for example. And that's something that people do use to make it visually very interesting. Each hub section, the content in it, the one thing about the hub control is you have to use a data template to define the content, so it can't be inline. So yeah, like I was saying, just stress that the background image, make sure you put that into the hub and background property so that you get all the full benefit of that, and it's all part of the user experience of this control. So don't put it on the page. So we got yet another version of this over on my machine. So we'll stop that one, and then just because I'm confused, I'm just going to go and delete all the old ones on here. See, normally I reboot the emulator a few times, but let's get rid of all these Contoso cookbooks. It gets very, very confusing knowing which one actually is the right one. Okay, that's a bit of housework. It's gone. Let's go and open the next one. So this is hub control, and we'll look at the hub page, which is the landing point, if you like, of this. We've got a number of data templates. These are the layouts for each of the sections in the hub. So here's the first one, which is just a tiled template. We've got another one a bit further down, which is something called a standard triple line item. So this one is a grid with a border and a stack panel and an image in the border. So that's image E1. And then this one is another data template, which has got another border and image, but obviously there's going to be some variation between them. And then carry on down, and finally we get to, this is actually the page layout. So the data templates are plugged into this. So we've got our hub. Here's our hub background. We've got an image. There's the first hub section, section 1 header, and there's the section 2 header. Oh, I said a minute ago you can't have them inline. Well, there's a lie, because there's an inline data template. You have to define it as data templates. That's what I meant to say. And then we got another hub section, the third hub section, and so it goes on. And actually, the easiest thing now is to run it, and you can see what it looks like.
So those data templates, those have to be inline, you said?
No, they don't have to be inline,
okay.
But it just means each hub section has to be a data template.
Okay. So
same as if you had a list item. So.
But we could save it. We could have it be a resource.
Yes.
And point the hub to the resource.
Yes, okay. That's right. Yeah. So here's this is the landing page. Now we've got a large, I don't know, what is that, tiramisu or something in the background image. But if you look, the background image moves across, but at a different speed to the foreground. So you go, ooh, that's lovely. And then we've got different groups here. The first one is an example of a group that's wider than the page, which is in a 6x2 grid. And then we've got another one, which is a long list. So it's all visually very rich and interesting. Slightly boring one for the Germans. Sorry, I haven't got anything against Germans or food. I mean, love it, but it's just an example, And then we've got Indian as well. So you can see how lovely it is. And then finally it wraps around, you get back to these. And all these are links as well. So now we're into familiar territory. This is kind of the same as, this is now we're back into pivot land. So, so you can see how nice that is. Very, very rich. What's happened? Come back. Very rich control. Looks beautiful. That's a quick look at the hub. Right. Now, just switching context a little bit, but it is related. So I want to look at a bit about page transitions and theme animation. So some of the animation support, as you've seen, loads of stuff is built in. I mean, that hub control, you don't have to code any of that stuff. This is how it works. So you got all that lovely acceleration and slowing down as you animate across, and the parallax effect for the image. It all comes for free. You might want to influence exactly how pages do animate. So, and again, this is ready for you, for all you Silverlight developers out there. Watch this and weep. So the signature phone animations are all built in. So Windows Phone 8 Silverlight, you could do all this stuff, but you used to have to download an additional package from NuGet, which was the phone toolkit, and that would add in support for page transition animations, and you had to change a few things. On the previous jump starts, it used to take up a good 10 minutes talking about all this sort of stuff, but now it's all built in. The page navigation, when you go from one page to another, the default is turnstile, and that is built into page navigations. And the other ones are all built in as well, like what's the true name for it is pointer down up. But actually what we know that as better is tilt effect, which means when you tap on a button, it kind of dips into the screen a little bit. You get this kind of weird 3D effect. So as you press on a button, you actually get a visual feedback that it actually is tilting into the screen. So that's all built into all the touchable controls as well. Page rotation, that's built in. So as you rotate the, if your page supports portrait and landscape, and we're going to look at that in the next session, you get the page rotation all built in, and escalator. And then we've got this other thing called theme animations and theme transitions. Actually what these are, it is a library of effects that you can use for advanced situations. Most of you as app devs will never need to program these directly. And these are actually what the built-in controls all use to give them all this lovely rich animations. All this stuff is built in using these things. So we'll look at them in a little more detail in a moment. So the page transition animations, they're all built in. The default animation is this thing called turnstile. But you may want to override that sometimes because we've got these other ones, continuum navigation transition info, well, lovely name, and stagger and slide in as well. So there's loads of stuff. Now, I'm actually not going to spend an awful lot of time trying to teach you this because there's a fantastic resource built into the SDK that helps you to get the most of this, which is actually all you need to do is create a new hub app and a pivot app. They have all of this built in. So you can study them, and I'll show you this in a moment, and see how it's used, and then apply them to your own apps. So the first one is this continuum navigation. So the idea is that you're in a list or something, you tap on an item, and actually if you see in the list now, Dinero Read in the list has got this nice tilt effect. But then, as you get to the next page, the name flies in from the top and the rest of the content flies in from the bottom. So this is an idea of continuum, which is a navigation that gives you the idea of continuous movement from the list where you selected an item onto the target page where you're navigating to. And part of you have to put some XAML into the leaving page, but part of that is on the landing page. You put this highlighted XAML on the right there, which you say continuum navigation transition info dot is entrance element equals true. So that with that you're identifying the element that's going to come in from the top, Dinero Read text in this case. And then, like I said, there's some other animation, there's some other XAML you put on the exit page as well. Look at the pivot template, create a new app to find out how to do it. And this one again, with the pivot, actually, if you look carefully at this animation, you'll see that as you animate across, the content actually doesn't all come across together. You get the header bit, and then the smaller text kind of follows in just behind it. So this is an idea of stagger. So where you get things in when you're animating across, they stagger in at different speeds. So again, it's a subtle effect, but it just adds to the richness of the animations you can use. I mentioned these theme transitions. So there are loads of them. They're documented in the MSDN documentation. There's a link at the bottom there. And these are all the themes that, if you remove an item from a list view, actually it doesn't just disappear. There's some nice animation, and the list view has this built in. So there's a nice animation as the original item kind of fades away, and then the rest of the list it closes up the gap in a nice animated way. This is all the, which one is this? This is a add delete theme transition. So all the built-in controls use these. So you probably won't have to, but you can, just making you aware of them. So if you've got a fancy effect you want to apply, go and look at this library and see if you can make use of them. The one you will make use of, though, is this entrance theme transition, and you just slap that onto the outer grid on your page. If you've got a grid with a number of items on it, just simply put the grid.children transitions and the transition collection entrance theme transition, that block of XAML in, underneath as a child of the grid, and you get a nice the effect is subtle, but the page doesn't just go bang and it shows itself. Actually it sort of folds in from the top a little bit, so you get a nice animated a nice animation, which I will show you. First of all, I'm just going to go File, New Project. Windows Phone apps. Let's create, like I said, what do I want? A pivot app. Create that. This, like I said, it's all built into this. So this is our app.sam. I'm not interested in that. That's just nothing. What we need is the pivot page. So here we've got our. First of all, you'll notice that we've got this page transitions, a navigation theme transition, and this is specifically for pivots. You want to put all of this onto the top of your page if you're using a pivot page. And you've got this is staggering enabled equals true. So we've enabled staggering for the page. That's not all you have to do, because then what you need to do is on various elements. So the pivot item, you say, well, this is a stagger element. So that's a stagger element. And then you'll say that actually this is a stagger element as well. And this is a stagger element. And if you run it, this is what gives it, as you swipe across, depends how fast your network is, Link's watching this, of course, but you'll see that actually this is that effect I was talking about, where the items come in, the content in the smaller text comes in slightly after the other one. You can swipe the other way across as well. The other thing is, if I hit on item title 2, we go to another page. Now, did you notice how the item title 2, we tap on that, we go to the other page, and the header comes in from the top. It kind of swirls in from the top, which is an interesting effect. That's this is the continuum thing. So this is the continuum navigation transition in for exit element containers. This is on the pivot where you're going out from. You set exit element container on the list view that contains the items that that the user is going to select from, and then the actual element that is going to be that you're going to link, which is kind of the name or the header, item title or whatever. You put that. Oh no, not that one. Here. Find it. Oh, it's on the other one. That's right. Sorry, the other. Here we go. It's the other list view. This is the list view, and then it's we've got. I will find it in a minute. I can't see it this font size. Somewhere there's an exit element container. I think it's in the data template. Yes, it will be in the data template. Here we go.
Exit, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. Exit element container is, yeah. Yeah, so study that. Yeah, study that. And we've built all this into the latest and greatest version of the Contosa cookbook, which is now looking truly beautiful. So I've worked all that in, and coming up on the screen now. And there's oh yes, we've got a nice stagger. Oh no, this is just a list, a boring list. So that one had the main page has the this on it, the entrance theme transition, so that when it comes in, you get. I'll just show you launching again. You get a slight delay coming in, and then we can select an item, and that had the continuum thing. We go to German and recipes, and oh yeah, there we've got the nice sliding effect, and we can go over to a particular recipe, and again we've got the sliding effect there, where the content is coming back into the page at a different speed, so that's nice. And we go back and go back again to there, and we've also got animation on the that wasn't what I no go away Cortana. What I meant to do is that, which is the about page, and again we've got a nice animation on that. So it's just a little bit of quality you can do with relatively little XAML and make your app look really cool. All right, I think that is that. So that was a short one on the main hub controls, the main page controls, and a little bit of nice gloss about animations. We're just going to take a break for a few minutes, and then we're going to come back, and Matthias is going to talk a bit about, okay, what about all these different size screens? How do we do the layout and handle all that? We'll see you in a few moments.